Chapter 11. The Unsettling Matter of the Spirit, Part 2. Somnambulism was a most mysterious condition. It caused one to move around as though awake, even when one was asleep. The cause could be some sort of disturbance in the heart, something no amount or type of medicine could cure, for there was no medicine to soothe a troubled spirit. Mau knew of a courtesan who had suffered from the condition. She had been of sunny disposition, a good singer, and one man had even been talking about buying her out of prostitution. But the negotiations fell through, for every night she would wander the brothel like a woman possessed. Ugly rumors began to dog her. When the madam tried to restrain her to stop her from walking around one night, the woman scratched her so badly she bled. The next day the other women confronted her about her behavior, but the courtesan said cheerfully, "My goodness, ladies, what are you talking about?" The woman remembered nothing, but her bare feet were covered with mud and scratches. "And what happened to her?" Jinshi asked. He, Mau, and Gaoxuan were in the sitting room together along with consort Gyokyo. Hongyang was looking after the little princess. "Nothing," Mau said curtly. When the discussions of her emancipation ended, so did her wandering around. "Was it that the discussions upset her, then?" Gyokyo asked with a puzzled look. Mau nodded. "It seems likely. The suitor was the head of a large business, but he was a man with not only a wife and children already, but even grandchildren. The woman's contract was going to be up within another year's work anyway. Perhaps she found the idea of working another year better than being married off to a man she had no interest in. In the end, the woman had worked out the remainder of her contract with no further offers to buy her out. Exceptional emotional agitation commonly results in wandering like this, so we tried to give her perfumes and medicines that might help calm her down. They relaxed her a little, but didn't do much more. Mau had always been the one to mix the concoctions, not her father." Jinshi said, with more than a touch of boredom. "And that's really all there is to that story." "That's all." Mau struggled not to sneer at Jinshi's languid look. Gaoxuan sat beside him, silently encouraging her in this effort. "If that's all you need, I must get back to work," Mau said. Then she bowed and left the room. Let's turn back the clock a bit. The day after she had witnessed the spirit, Mau had gone to see her favorite chatterbox, Xiaolan. Xiaolan was forever trying to pry information about Gyokyo out of Mau, so this time Mau fed her some innocuous tidbits in exchange for what she knew about the ghost. The trouble had been about 2 weeks before. The spirit had been first spotted in the northern quarter. Shortly after that, it had begun to be seen in the eastern quarter and started to appear every night. The guards, frightened by the entire situation, did nothing about it, but as the situation didn't seem to be causing any harm, no one punished them for their inaction. It seemed that the deep moat, the high walls, and the overall impenetrability of the rear palace had left the guards susceptible to such fears, worthless for security. Next, Mau had headed to see the quack. His loose lips told her something new, about Princess Fuyo, how she had been unwell lately. She was the third princess of a vassal state so small it could have been flicked away with a finger. Though she was given the title princess, she was really little more than a highly ranked concubine. She had a building in the northern quarter. She liked to dance, but she was nervous and high-strung and had once made a mistake while dancing for His Majesty. The other consorts in attendance had laughed at her, and since then she had refused to come out of her room. A sensitive soul, one might say. Princess Fuyo had no conspicuous qualities other than her dancing, and it was said that in the 2 years since she had come to the rear palace, His Majesty had not spent the night with her once. Now she was to be given in marriage to a military official, an old friend of hers, and one hoped might be happy. Father always said not to say anything based on assumptions, Mau thought, and so she resolved not to. The princess, pale and demure, was blushing as she passed through the central gate. She was not uncommonly beautiful, but her palpable happiness excited cries of admiration from the onlookers. A collective expectant gaze turned on the gate. If one was going to be given in marriage, this was the ideal. This was how it should look. "Surely you can at least tell me," consort Gyokyo said with a lustrous smile. Though she was already the mother of a little girl, she was in fact not quite 20 years old, and the smile had a hoydenish quality about it. What should I do? Mau thought. Consort Gyokyo had fixed her with her best stare and wasn't letting up, and at length Mau gave in. "If you understand that what I'm going to say is ultimately just speculation," she started with a sigh, "and if you promise not to get angry." "Of course I won't get angry. I was the one who asked." It was looking like she had no choice but to talk. Mau braced herself. "And you won't tell anyone else?" "My lips are sealed. Gyokyo sounded almost flippant, but Mama decided to trust her. Then she told the consort the story of the sleepwalking courtesan, not the one she had told Jinshi and the rest of them the day before, a different story. Just like the other courtesan, the condition had first manifested when a suitor proposed to buy her out of her contract. The talks fell through. This much was the same as the other story, but this woman didn't stop sleepwalking, and the perfumes and medicines that had been given the first courtesan some relief didn't help this one at all. Then someone else offered to buy the woman out of her contract. The madam said she couldn't foist a sick person off that way, but the suitor insisted they were still interested. And so the agreement was sealed, at half the price in silver of the first man's offer. We learned later that it had been a con all along. A con? The first man who had come with an offer was a friend of the second. Knowing that the woman would feign illness, he then broke off the negotiations. Then his friend swooped in and got her for half the price. This courtesan still had a substantial amount of time left on her contract, and the silver the man paid for her wasn't enough to cover it. And you're suggesting these women and Princess Fuyo have something in common? The military official, the old friend, might have been from the same vassal state, but he was nonetheless not really of high enough social standing to seek to marry a princess. He had hoped to perform enough valorous deeds that he might one day be able to ask for her hand. Politics intervened, and Fuyo found herself in the rear palace. Still longing for her official, the princess deliberately botched her otherwise accomplished dancing to ensure she would not draw the emperor's attention. Then she shut herself up in her room until she seemed no more than a shadow in the palace. Just as she had intended. She was still pure at the end of 2 years, the emperor never having visited once. The military official had performed his valorous deeds, and now when he was to receive Princess Fuyo in marriage, she began to manifest these mysterious wanderings. She was trying to ensure that His Majesty would have no cause to have second thoughts about sending her away, no reason to suddenly make her his bedfellow. There are, after all, some unscrupulous men of power who cannot stand to see a woman go to someone else, even a woman they never valued. If His Majesty were to take Princess Fuyo into his bedchamber, she could not be married off until later, and Fuyo herself, fastidious about her chastity, would be unable to face her childhood friend after she had spent the night with the emperor. Then, too, perhaps her dancing by the eastern gate was in part a prayer for her friend's safety on his expeditions. Again, I have to stress that this is just speculation, Mama said calmly. Well, I can't say you're wrong as far as His Majesty is concerned. The lusty emperor could conceivably find his interest kindled in someone that one of his subordinates obviously valued so much. He visited Gyokyo once every few days, and some of the nights on which he did not visit could be accounted for by his need to attend on official business. But not all of them. One of His Majesty's duties was to produce as many children as possible. I suppose it would make me the most awful person to say I felt jealous of Princess Fuyo. Mama shook her head. I don't think so. She was more or less convinced that she had things figured out correctly, but she felt no special impulse to tell Jinshi. All the women involved would be happier that way. His ignorance was their bliss. She wanted her smile to stay as soft and innocent as it was. It seemed everything had been resolved. But in fact, one mystery still remained. How did she get all the way up there? Mamau asked, gazing up at the wall 4 times as tall as she was. Perhaps she would have to look into it sometime. As she danced that night, Princess Fuyo had looked truly beautiful, like the heroine of one of the illustrated story scrolls the women so enjoyed. It was almost hard to believe she was the same woman as the stoic, reticent princess. Mama went back to the Jade Pavilion, but her thoughts were less elevated than this. If only she could bottle love, what a medicine it would be that could make a woman so beautiful. Chapter 12. The Threat. There was a crash. The porridge of boiled potatoes and grains went flying, along with the tea and the crushed fruits. Mama, her clothes soaked in porridge, looked up at the person in front of her. You would dare serve this tripe to Lady Leewa. Make it again and do it right this time. A heavily made-up young woman was glaring at Mau, one of Consort Leewa's ladies-in-waiting. Ugh, what a pain. Mau sighed and started gathering the dishes and cleaning up the spilled food. She was in the Crystal Pavilion, Lady Leewa's residence. Unfriendly gazes surrounded her, mocking looks, scornful eyes, and downright hostile expressions. For a servant of Consort Gyokyo like Mamau, this was truly enemy territory, a bed of nails. His Majesty had come to Gyokyo's chambers the night before. Mamau had tasted the food for poison, as she always did, and had been about to leave the room when the Emperor himself had spoken to her. I have a request for the apothecary of whom I've heard so much." Wonder what exactly he's heard. The emperor was a robust man and handsome, only in his mid-30s. And he was the absolute ruler of this nation. No wonder he dazzled the women of the rear palace. Mama was one of the few exceptions. Approximately the only thing she thought of the emperor was, "That's a really long beard. I wonder what it feels like to touch." "Now," she asked, "what might that be, your majesty?" With a deferential bow of her head. She knew that she was insignificant before the emperor, that a breath from his majesty could blow away her life, and she wanted to get out of the room before she accidentally breached etiquette somehow. "Consort Leewa is feeling unwell. Perhaps you could look after her for a while." Well, there it was. And as Mama wanted her head and her shoulders to remain close relations for a long time to come, the only possible answer was, "Of course, sire." By "look after her," Mama understood his majesty to mean make her better. The emperor no longer favored Consort Leewa with his visits, but perhaps some vestige of his affection remained, or perhaps he simply knew he couldn't neglect the daughter of a powerful man. It made no difference. If Mama didn't help her, she couldn't expect to hold on to her head for very long. In a manner of speaking, she and Leewa would share the same fate. The fact that the emperor had asked this of a young girl like Mama meant either that he knew perfectly well that the doctor of the rear palace could not be relied upon, or that he didn't care if either or both of them died. In either case, it was a reckless request to make. The more time Mamau spent with these people who ruled in the imperial palace, who lived above the clouds as the traditional expression went, the more she found herself thinking about how much their every command and desired cause. Still, he did really have to ask me right in front of his other consort. She almost marveled at a man who could make a request like that of her, then eat a luxurious meal and be intimate with Consort Kyokyo immediately afterwards. Maybe that was just the emperor for you. When Mama began to look after Consort Leewa, the first thing she turned her eye to was improving the woman's diet. The poisonous face powder had been banished from use in the rear palace on Jinshi's command, and thorough punishment appointed for the merchants who had brought it in the first place. It would not be possible to get more of the stuff from here on out, in which case the priority had been expunging the remaining toxins from Leewa's body. Her current meals were based on bland congee, but it was frequently topped with things like deep-fried fish, broiled pork, red and white bean buns, and other rich foods like shark fin or crab. Nutritious, true enough, but too heavy for the stomach of a convalescent. Forcing herself not to salivate, Mama told the cook to change the menu. The weight of an imperial assignment gave even an unimportant lady-in-waiting like Mama a certain amount of authority, and Leewa's meals were made to consist of porridge, rich in fiber, tea, an excellent diuretic, and fruit, easily digested. Unfortunately, all of these were now scattered on the ground. Mama, raised in the red light district as she was appalled by the waste of food. The women of the Crystal Pavilion were less impressed by whatever imperial commission Mama might have had than they were displeased by the fact that she served their rival, Consort Gyokyo. Mama would have gladly given them all a piece of her mind, but instead she bit her tongue and cleaned up the mess. Leewa's ladies-in-waiting brought the consort sumptuous meals, but over time they came back more and more untouched. Presumably the ladies got to enjoy the leftovers. Mama would have liked to perform a proper physical examination of the patient, but Leewa's canopied bed was surrounded by a phalanx of ladies-in-waiting, collectively performing a rather ungracious and ineffective nursing duty. When they provoked a cough by slapping whitening powder on Leewa's face while she was asleep, they would explain, "The air is bad in here. It's this noxious worm," and chase Mama out of the room. She couldn't get at Leewa to do an exam. No question in my mind, at this rate she'll keep wasting away until she dies. Maybe she had taken in too much of the poison and it was too late to get it out of her system. Or perhaps she simply wasn't strong enough. If a person didn't eat, they would die. Leewa appeared to be losing the will to live. Mama was leaning against a wall, counting the number of days her head was likely to remain attached to her body, when she heard a shrill of coquettish voices. She had a very bad feeling about this. She raised her head very slowly and found herself confronted with a gorgeous face smiling like the sun. It was the beautiful eunuch. "You look troubled," he said. "Do I?" Mama replied tonelessly, her eyes half closed. "I wouldn't have said it if you didn't." He stared straight at her, so she tried looking away instead. He leaned in, his eyelashes noticeably long, to counter her, and when their eyes met again, Mama very much broke her promise to Gauchman by adopting the expression of someone looking at a piece of garbage. "What is with that girl?" The words were soft but venomous. Mau Mau was referring to the woman who had spilled the food. She was insufferable, and she veritably exuded menace. A woman's wrath was a terrible thing, but Jinshi nonetheless said softly into her ear with his honeyed voice, "Shall we go inside?" Mau Mau found herself pushed into the room before she could object. The chamber's self-appointed guardians looked even more dangerous than before, but when they saw the nymph beside Mau Mau, they immediately put on nonchalant smiles, even though they were all obviously forced. Truly, women could be terrifying creatures. "Surely you agree it's unbecoming for lovely, talented young ladies to make a hash of the Emperor's good offices." The women paused. They bit their lips, and then one by one they backed away from the bed. "There now, go," Jinshi said, giving Mau Mau a little shove on the back that almost toppled her over. She bowed and approached the bed, then took Leewa's hand. It was pale. The veins stood out prominently. Mau Mau had some experience of medicine, the practice of healing, if not as much as she had of medicine, the concoctions that did the healing. Leewa's eyes were closed, and she didn't fight Mau Mau. It was hard to tell if she was even awake or asleep. She already seemed to have one foot in the grave. Mau Mau placed a finger on Leewa's face, hoping to get a better look at her eye. She was greeted by a slick, slippery texture. Leewa's skin was as pale as it had ever been. "It hasn't changed?" Mau Mau frowned, then went over to the ladies in waiting. She stood in front of one of them, the one who had been making the consort up earlier. In a deliberately soft, restrained voice, Mau Mau asked, Are you the one who does the ladies' makeup?" "I certainly am. It's a lady-in-waiting's duty, you know." The woman seemed mildly intimidated by Mau Mau's searing look. It obviously took everything she had to remain defiant. "We want Consort Leewa to be as beautiful as she can, always." The girl sniffed. She sounded so sure of herself. "Is that right?" A crack echoed through the room. The girl stumbled aside in the direction of the force, hardly knowing what had happened. She felt an unfamiliar heat in her cheek and ear. Mau Mau's right hand had smarted. It burned almost as much as the girl's left cheek. Mau Mau had smacked her about as hard as she was able. "What's wrong with you?" one of the other ladies in waiting demanded. Several of them were openly astounded. "Me? I'm just giving an idiot her due." Mau Mau grabbed the girl by the hair, pulling her to her feet. "Ow! That hurts! Stop!" the lady in waiting wailed, but Mau Mau paid her no heed. She dragged the girl over to the makeup stand and picked up a carved jar with her free hand. She opened the lid and smeared the contents on the face of the lady in waiting. White powder went everywhere, causing coughing fits. Tears brimmed in the young woman's eyes. "There! Now you can be as beautiful as your lady. Lucky you!" Mau Mau gave a tug of the girl's hair, forcing her to meet her eyes, and leered like a beast with its prey in its claws. "You can have poison in your pores, in your mouth, in your nose, in every part of your body. You can wither away just like your beloved Lady Leewa until your eyes are sunken and your skin is bloodless." "No, I don't believe you." The newly powdered lady in waiting simpered. "You don't understand why this stuff was forbidden, do you? It's poison!" Mau Mau was well and truly angry now, not because of the sneers and glares, not because of the spilled porridge, but because of this fool of a lady in waiting who thought of nothing but simply assumed she was right about everything. "But it's the prettiest, the most beautiful. I thought Lady Leewa would be happy." Mau Mau dipped her hand in the powder scattered on the floor, then grabbed the girl's cheek, pulling, distorting her lips. "Who would be happy to be continually covered in poison that sucks their life away?" It was like listening to a child trying to explain why they'd done something wrong. Mau Mau gave a click of her tongue and let the woman go. A few long strands of dark hair remained wrapped around her fingers. "All right, go rinse your mouth out and wash your face." She watched the girl all but flee the room, weeping, and then she turned to the other ladies in waiting, who were now thoroughly frightened. "Go on! You want that stuff to get on the patient? Clean it up!" She pointed to the powdery floor, deciding to ignore the fact that she was the one who had spilled it. The other ladies in waiting winced, but then went to get the cleaning supplies. Mau Mau crossed her arms and snorted. Some of the powder was on her clothes, but she didn't care. One person had remained calm and collected through all of this. "Women are indeed terrifying," Jinshi said now, tucking his hands into his wide sleeves. Mau Mau had completely forgotten he was there. "Ugh!" she said as a rush of blood to her head subsided. She squatted down right where she was. Now she'd done it.